Hi everyone, this is day number 3 of my 4-day book tribute for Women's History Month. And the book that I will be reviewing today is Ida B. Wells-Barnett, Let the Truth Be Told, written by Walter Dean Myers and illustrated by Bonnie Christensen. I selected this book from my job because I have been eyeing it for several months. The reason I've been eyeing it is because I am a huge fan of Ida B. Wells-Barnett. I love her writing. I love all that she did for people of African descent. So I decided that I would buy it for this tribute in particular. And if you'd like to buy it, like the price I paid, it was basically $6.99. This book was published in 2008. And it is published by an imprint of HarperCollins. So the imprint is Amistad. If you know that name, Amistad was a ship that had brought some enslaved Africans, and there's a whole court case, but I digress. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Amistad. It says, Amistad, the premier publisher of multicultural fiction and nonfiction. This renowned imprint showcases award-winning novelists, celebrated cultural figures, and esteemed critics and scholars. And the history of Amistad was actually a separate thing before HarperCollins attained it. So it says Amistad was first created in 1967 by Charles F. Harris as 2 volumes of collected writings on African American history and culture. Harris began his publishing career in 1956 at Doubleday and Company and would go on to launch the Amistad paperback magazine in 1970, and then Amistad Press as an independent publisher in the summer of 1986. In October 1999, HarperCollins acquired Amistad Press. Tracy Sherrod is the current editorial director. So that is all about Amistad, the imprint of HarperCollins. Now I will read to you a biography of the author, Walter Dean Myers. 5-time Coretta Scott King Award winner Walter Dean Myers was the acclaimed author of a wide variety of nonfiction and fiction for young people. His nonfiction includes We Are America, A Tribute from the Heart, and then it goes on to share some other books. He was the 2012 to 2013 National Ambassador for Young People's Literature and an inaugural NYC Literary Honoree. Learn more about him online at www.walterdeanmyers.net and www.who-is-america.com. So, Walter Dean Myers, who passed away in 2014. He has so many books and they are still popular to this day. He has a book called Monster, which is very popular with high schoolers. Another called Game, which is popular with high schoolers as well. A biography on Malcolm X, and one about Muhammad Ali, and several others. One is Now is the Time. He writes very heavy subject matter, but he does it very well. That's why he's very popular with middle school and high school. But I honestly didn't know he passed away until today, because his books would just be circulating out of the store. Everybody loves his writing. So, Bonnie Christensen, the illustrator. Bonnie Christensen is a fine artist and printmaker who teaches at St. Michael's College in Vermont. She has illustrated The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck for the Folio Society in London and 10 books for children, including Woody Guthrie, Poet of the People, a Boston Globe Horn Book, Honor Book, and Pompeii, Lost and Found. You can visit her online at www.bonniechristensen.com. So don't go to her website because it doesn't exist anymore. I have seen her illustrations somewhere, but I honestly don't know where I've seen them. I believe she did an excellent job portraying Ida B. Wells-Barnett. I love her style. Unfortunately, Bonnie Christensen, she passed away in 2015. So that was maybe a year after Walter Dean Myers. She passed away from ovarian cancer. But I'm glad that these two got together and collaborated to make this literary tribute to Ida B. Wells-Barnett. So now I will review the book. So as far as this book, it is a moving biography about Miss Barnett. It talks about her life from childhood through adulthood. Throughout the book, they have quotes that she said. And if you don't feel like looking through the entire book to get her quotes, Walter Dean Myers and the rest have placed all of Ida B. Wells' quotes at the end of this book. So that way you can just read through it. So Ida B. Wells-Barnett, she was born enslaved in Holly Springs, Mississippi, July 16th, 1862. Every year I heard they have a festival in Holly Springs for her. So she was born enslaved. She's the first child of her parents. And a couple of years after she was born, enslavement ended thanks to the 13th Amendment. So as a result, like most parts of the country, a lot of people began to learn how to read during the Reconstruction. So these Methodists came to Ida B. Wells-Barnett's town and they were teaching people how to read. So she assisted her mother in learning how to read. Her and her mother learned together. That is what you would see a lot of the times, like, or read about accounts of after the Civil War ended. You would have classrooms filled with older Black people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or older, and little children, and they're all learning how to read together in one schoolhouse. And what I felt was interesting was a lot of them wanted to read the Bible, and she even mentions this in her quote. She says, "My mother went along to school with us until she learned to read the Bible. After that, she visited the school regularly to see how we were getting along." And this is from Ida B. Wells's autobiography, The Crusade for Justice. I feel like a lot of enslaved Black people wanted to read the Bible because some people used the Bible to oppress them. Others got great comfort from the Bible. Others wanted to learn exactly what it said to see if they were being told the truth or not. So I feel learning to read the Bible was a very important element in people learning how to read. So as Ida B. Wells is gaining her skills in becoming, fluent with words, she begins to get a broader view of the world. And because of this reading, she gets inspired to become a writer. So she's writing. And she's talking about lynchings. So when she was 16 years old, her parents died. Her parents and her youngest sibling died from yellow fever. So I'm not going to show you all the illustrations based off copyright, but this is the illustration of Ida B. Wells with her siblings. And she becomes the provider, the sole provider for the family. And that is a gigantic task for somebody who is only 16 years old. She said that she was going to provide for her family. I couldn't do it when I was 16 years old. Maybe 16-year-olds nowadays, some of them can, some of them cannot. But that is a very big task. Like, you have all of these siblings, you're young, you're just starting out with your life, and you have this tragedy. So that truly shows what a powerful, powerful person she was. And that makes me even more amazed by her. So as a result of becoming the caretaker, she becomes a teacher, an educator. She's gathering all of these skills. She's making money. But then an incident happens on the train. She had bought a first class ticket and they tried to make her sit in the smoke car. This was when she was in she in Memphis? I don't know where she was. It says she left the train and went back to Memphis. So I honestly don't know where she was. I would have to go back and read. But she sued the railroad. And she did win her case. But she didn't get all of her money. She was supposed to get at least $500, but she didn't receive the money that she had won in court. So all of these different incidents in her life led her to the path of becoming a journalist, led her to the path of becoming more vocal about the issues that Black people were facing in this society. And she focused mainly on lynchings. She exposed so many lynchings in her book, Southern Horrors and A Red Record, and it was very shocking to people that had either turned a blind eye or they didn't know about it. So she kept going at it, and because of this passion, it stemmed over into other passions, such as women's rights and other things. So she travels. She traveled to Scotland and England, talking about all of the atrocities that America was committing against people of African descent. She states, in the past 10 years, over 1,000 Black men and women and children have met this violent death at the hands of a white mob, and the rest of America has remained silent. And this is from May 16th, 1893. Some people, when they read about lynchings, they'll only hear mostly about men and a few women, but there were children. The youngest child I ever read of being lynched was Mary Turner's unborn baby. She was 8 months pregnant, and they cut out the baby and stomped on him. This was at the turn of the century, like 1917, 1919, around that time. But yes, she wanted to expose all of the things that people, these racist people, were doing to her people. They weren't giving Black people a fair trial. They weren't doing due process of law. They were accusing Black men of rape when they had not raped anyone at all. They were lynching Black people for being successful in business. And she even mentions that in one of her quotes. She says, after her friends got lynched because they were successful in business, and they also burned down, they burned down her office because Ida B. Wells was talking more about lynchings in the papers and everything. So they burned down her office. She couldn't write anymore. So she moved out of town. She went to New York. Hold on. Did she move to New York? Yeah. She went to Chicago. My mistake. But her quote is, "This is what opened my eyes to what lynching really was, an excuse to get rid of Negroes who were acquiring wealth and property." Isn't that something? It's just amazing. If you read 100 Years of Lynchings, you'll see over and over and over Black businesses being destroyed, Black business owners being lynched because they were successful in business. It was all a money game. It was all a power game. So later on in her life, she gets married to her husband, Ferdinand Lee Barnett, says an attorney and newspaper publisher. And what I really like about him is that he did not try to silence her. She also connected with Susan B. Anthony and Jane Addams, who were suffragists and therefore women's rights. So one of them, says Anthony, says, "Oh yes, but not women like you," because she was concerned about her being married. And Ida B. Wells says, "Miss Anthony, don't you believe in women getting married?" And Miss Anthony says, "Oh yes, but not women like you, who had a special call for special work. I know of no one in this country better fitted to do the work you had in hand than yourself." So some of the women back in those days, and even women nowadays. They'll be like, okay, you're getting married. Are you going to be silent? Are you going to take on the role of wife and mother full time and just stop with the protests and everything? Because some women, when they did get married, they had to stop everything they were doing because of their husbands. But I admire Ida B. Wells' husband because he did not stop her from doing what was her destiny. In fact, he was supportive of her, and that is a beautiful thing. That is what a marriage is supposed to be, mutual support. They saw that this was for the greater good of people of African descent. We had to take on a different role. So, it says, although a wife and mother, Ida continued to write and organize. In 1909, she was one of the major speakers and organizers of the group that would eventually call itself the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. But it doesn't really go into detail why she really wasn't a part of them. I think because maybe it was, I don't know, like integrate. I don't know. It was some issue going on with the Niagara movement turning into the NAACP. But I have not researched this enough, so I cannot give you an educated explanation of why. But she placed herself in the political field. She created the Alpha Suffrage Group in 1913. She was convinced that women's suffrage was critical to political change for Black women. And then women ended up getting the right to vote in 1920. But I don't think it was for Black women. I just assume it's for white women, but not Black women voting. It talks about Woodrow Wilson. He was a piece of work. I think him and Eisenhower. So near the end, it says, Ida Wells spoke up for what she believed. Her weapons were her keen mind and her pen. In 1930, feeling that candidates for the state legislature in Illinois were not doing enough for the people, she ran for the state senate. She did not win the race, but again, her clear and passionate voice was heard. And so she died March 25th of 1931. So we're going to have to do something to celebrate the legacy of Ida B. Wells-Barnett on March 25th. That falls on a Monday. So I'm going to figure out something to do this upcoming March 25th to remember our ancestor, Ida B. Wells-Barnett. At the end of this book, there's a timeline. Has a beautiful little timeline. It says in 1990, she was placed on a U.S. postage stamp, which was very honorable. In 1889, she became the editor and part owner of Free Speech and Highlight. 1893, she delivers a series of lectures on lynchings in Great Britain. So Ida B. Wells-Barnett, she is an activist that we need to emulate. Not everybody is made to be an activist. Not everybody has that grit that she had to do the things that she did. But we need people like this in our community to push forward, to expose things that people are silent about. And that is why I truly admire her, because she could have been silent. She could have just been a teacher and married some attorney and been a stay-at-home mom and the end. She didn't have to be out here fighting for women's rights. She didn't have to be exposing all of these things happening with lynchings. She made that a personal choice. It was her destiny. And that is why people like her, you only hear about every 1,000 years, basically, every few hundred years, because it takes a special person to carry a torch like that. So thank you for watching this video. I highly recommend this book, Ida B. Wells-Barnett, Let the Truth Be Told for Women's History Month, and looking forward to the last day of my Women's History Month tribute tomorrow. Have a nice night, everyone.